demonstrate the skill in a role play. This is usually done by the leaders. Usually when we're doing groups, it's best if you can have two people co-leading the group. And it's also most effective if the role plays are planned out ahead rather than spontaneous. I mean, really good leaders who've done a lot of work together can spontaneously come up with role plays, but in the process of learning, it's better to have some planned ones in advance. And the idea is that you explain to the group, you're going to demonstrate the particular components of the skill, you want them to watch and to see what they see you doing, and then you're going to talk about it afterwards. And sure enough, afterwards you talk about it. What do people see? You go through the different steps. Was I looking at the person? Did I have a serious expression? What did I actually say I was upset about? And so what you do is you elicit feedback both about the components of the skill as well as about the overall effectiveness. And let me point out that when you're eliciting the feedback in this way, to some extent what you're doing is you're helping people improve their social cognition skills. Social cognition refers to the ability to recognize relevant social information or parameters in a situation. It could be somebody's facial expression. It could be the nature of the situation, about whether you have a working relationship with somebody or a friendship or a collegial relationship. You know, the differences between those. Social skills training doesn't necessarily provide enough training in social cognition proper, and sometimes there's a benefit to making that a focus of work in its own right, but there is some amount of social cognition training incorporated within social skills training programs. So you go through the skill, then the next thing you do is you engage a client in a role play. There's a bunch of different ways of doing that. The way we often do it is we actually stick with the same situation for the first time we're introducing a skill, with the notion being that we want to familiarize people with the skill, deal with kind of a generic or a common situation. Then as people get familiar with it, they can begin practicing it in their own personally experienced situations. But being able to use the same situation makes it an easier skill for people to do the first time round. And so we engage somebody in it. It's often helpful to start with somebody who you think is going to do a somewhat better job or is going to be a little more willing to go along with it. Initially, sometimes people are a little bit reluctant about role-playing, and we talk about role-playing when we engage people in social skills training groups. We explain that people become comfortable with it when they practice it a few times. And then we, as leaders, often engage in role plays ourselves as demonstrations. So it's important to be able to show to consumers, hey, we're willing to do it, and it's not as bad as you think. We try to get people to humor us with it, and usually within a few sessions, everybody's actively practicing the skills in role plays, and there's no problems related to that. So we engage the person in a role play of the situation. And often we're talking about fairly brief role plays. They can last less than a minute. Sometimes more extended ones can be 2 or 3 minutes, usually not longer than that. Then we provide positive feedback. We like to elicit it from the group members by asking questions like, what did you see so-and-so do there that you liked? Which steps of the skill did you see them like? If somebody says something negative, and sometimes that happens, you kind of cut them off, because the idea is you first want to reinforce the effort and what the person did well. Anybody who's had supervision from somebody who follows the steps of social skills training knows that it can really decrease the anxiety associated with this kind of evaluative situation if your efforts and if your strengths are first noted. And then if there's suggestions for modifications, how to do it better, that can come afterwards. But you always try to give some genuine, specific feedback about what the person did well. And the leader can elicit that. Like if things didn't go very well at all, but the leader knows that the person did something pretty well, you can say, what did you like about so-and-so's voice tone? So you elicit positive feedback about the person's voice tone. Then you can provide some corrective feedback. It's usually preferable not to give a whole lot of corrective feedback, maybe to give one particular suggestion. People can only change so many things at a time, so you don't want to overburden the person. And you want to use the corrective feedback to help them change it. So you use it as a suggestion for how they could do it even more effectively the next time, and then you try to engage them in another role play. It's always preferable to get people to participate in at least a couple, and sometimes we'll do 3 or 4 role plays. I mean, it doesn't take very long, especially if the role plays are fairly brief, each time working on small modifications to the skill. So that's the second role play, and then you follow that same basic procedure. You give positive feedback about what the person did well. If you're going to engage the person in another role play, you can give some corrective feedback. If not, you can kind of leave it at that. But the idea, again, being that what you're doing is you're using the positive feedback to reinforce the particular components of the skill that you're working on. Now, there are a number of other strategies you can use to help the person learn the particular components. One thing is just instructing them. You can also do additional modeling, in other words, demonstrating it again. You can also use prompts or coaching in the middle of a role play to help a person through the particular steps. The basic philosophy of social skills training is you want to, by hook or by crook, somehow elicit a more appropriate social response in a pretend situation, and then give lots and lots of positive feedback about that, and then try to remove or reduce the extent of prompting and instructions that you're providing. Then you provide additional feedback, just like the way you did, and the basic idea is you do this and you go around and you engage everybody in the skill, in a role play of the skill within a particular session. Now, this is an example of how you introduce a particular skill. At the end of the session, you provide a home assignment. And the home assignments are most effective when the person is involved in tailoring their own home assignment. Where are they going to do it? When are they going to do it? With whom? So that they feel that they're a part of it and it's not just something that's being given to them. Home assignments are also more effective when they're followed through at the beginning of each session and in the following session. And when you have indigenous supporters and other people, you can use these people to facilitate the follow-through on home assignments. And then that kind of goes into the follow-up sessions and the structure of follow-up sessions. Typically in skills training groups, we'll spend anywhere from 1 to 2 or 3 sessions focusing on a particular skill before then moving on to another skill. So I'm going to move ahead. I kind of mentioned these as supplementary teaching strategies that are often incorporated into social skills training groups. There's a wide variety of different clinical strategies that can be used to help people learn the different skills. I'm just kind of scratching the surface right now. So let me talk just a little bit about research on social skills training and a little bit about how practical problems are sometimes dealt with, challenges like cognitive impairments and psychotic symptoms.